stream. Okay, thanks. Welcome everyone to this May Dear Neighbor series. We're going to get started in a moment. I'm just going to pull up our slides to share. And welcome if you're just joining live. Feel free to write in the chat where you're tuning in from. You can see folks from all over the country here. Okay. Oh, Kristen, you have the slides already. Perfect. Great. I was thinking you could. So we're seeing folks from Long Island, Boston, Rochester, Ohio, St. Louis. So welcome to everyone. So we'll go ahead and get started, as we often do, with our opening prayer. So I invite you to remain muted for this and just take a moment to pause, remembering that you're in the presence of the holy. So we offer this opening prayer. Stimulated by the Holy Spirit of love and receptive to the Spirit's inspirations, we move always towards profound love of God and love of neighbor without distinction, from whom we do not separate ourselves, and for whom, in the following of Christ, we work in order to achieve unity of neighbor with neighbor and neighbor with God. In humility, the spirit of the incarnate word. In sincere charity, the manner of Saint Joseph whose name we bear. In an Ignatian Salesian climate, that is with an orientation towards excellence, tempered by gentleness, peace, joy. It's our consensus statement. Good to always ground us in that. For this month, we picked out maxim number 88. And as usual, we will offer two translations of this, one from Marcia Allen and one from a group of high school students. I think it's good to get those perspectives as well. So maxim 88. Be careful about the good use of time, which is so precious, not losing a minute of it, devoting and offering it to God unreservedly with very pure and noble intentions. The moments of your life are precious. Use them well. So today we'll hear from Agrégées from across the Federation, so I'll turn it over to whoever will speak first.
Mary Ellen, are you going to say something?
Going to introduce you. Speaking to us first is Sister Phyllis Esposito from the Brentwood congregation. Phyllis is a member of the leadership team in Brentwood, but she has worked with associates at Agregees for many, many years and has a good background and history in it. And Phyllis coordinates the Agregees for the Brentwood congregation. So she's going to speak with us today a little bit about the history of Agregees and how they came to be. And then she will introduce one of the Agregees from Brentwood, Cathy Roberts, who will share her experience of being an Agrégée. So Phyllis, we turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here with you. And in this context, especially, I would say that I am a canonically vowed member of the Sisters of St. Joseph. And with me, I do have Cathy Roberts, who is an Agrégée. We have been asked to talk a little bit about the Agregees. And this is not easy because this is an evolution of a form of life that has deep roots in our congregation, but which has been hidden for many years. The best thumbnail explanation of the Agregees is on the Federation website. I don't know if you have checked it out, but if you look at the tab that says Become an Agrégée, you will find a 13-minute video, which was prepared by the Concordia congregation. It indicates that from our very early days, we had two groups of sisters, the principal sisters or the city sisters, and the Agregees, or the country sisters. The last historical notation of an agrégé was in 1792, smack dab in the middle of the horrors of the French Revolution. After that, the agrégés seemed to be lost until the Bearers of Tradition program in 2004. It was then that Betty Moslander and Marcia Allen began the process of study and exploration within the Concordia congregation. The process that followed is one which many of us are familiar with in our own ways. The formation of a committee, research, dissemination of information, reflection, the experience of women who felt that they did have a call, prayer, discussion, trial and error, and ultimately a vote by some forum of the canonically professed sisters in the congregation. The Spirit worked in other places in the Federation. In our own Brentwood congregation, Pat Monahan, a former member of the community, read about the Concordia experience and recognized in it her heart's desire, and it was expressed in words. So she appealed to our leadership team and asked that we explore the Agrégées. That was in 2016. So we began an exploratory committee and went through the same stages that I described above in our own way. Ultimately, we had our first profession ceremony on June 14th, 2021, when 5 women, including Cathy Roberts, who's here on the screen, and also Pat Monahan, who continued in the process. The 5 professed their vow of fidelity. On January 5th, another agrégée, Maureen, who had been ill in June, but had gone through the formation process with the original group, she made her vow. And then on May 1st, 2023, our next group of 3 made their vow. So we now have 9 agrégées. So this is a little bit about the rediscovery story and a bit about our own story. But I want to share with you another wonderful development before I turn this over to Cathy so that she can talk about her personal story. This is the evolution of what we call Agregees USA. In 2021, one of our very senior sisters told me that a former student of hers, who is now an agrégée in Springfield, Massachusetts, wanted to speak with someone who is connected with the Agrégées in Brentwood. So I called this person, whose name was Karen Hurd, formerly a Brooklyn girl, but now a Springfield resident, and also an agrégée. And we decided that it would be good for our 2 groups to connect. Thanks to our Zoom expertise, one of the few good results of COVID, we planned a meeting for the agrégées and canonically vowed companions to meet together. Most of the meeting was sharing of the heart, and it was a very deep and intimate sharing of the heart. We decided to meet again, and we decided that we would invite the Boston group to join us. Again, the word I used was we kind of like folded groups in so that each time we had a chance to meet the people who were there as people, with that opportunity again of real sharing. So Boston came to the next meeting. And then we moved a little west to Erie, to northwestern Pennsylvania. And finally, we reached out to Concordia. And in each case, there was that introduction and sharing of the heart of, obviously, there couldn't be, an awful lot of conversation, but the connection was made. And then we became aware that there was a group of agrégées in Carondelet. We were not aware at first because they have not yet been approved by their general chapter. They're looking forward to that in 2025, but then we included them, and they are an essential part of our meetings because we still do meet. At the time of the Federation event in 2022, we were already meeting. So therefore, we decided to meet in person the night before the general session began. And we did it hybrid, and we were amazed. There were 32 who were there in the hall and in the hallway outside the hall, and also 31 on Zoom. But once again, the sharing was rich. The experience was rich. And the group is called Agregees USA, just so that we know who we're talking about when we're talking about the group that meets this way. And we've decided together to meet 4 times a year. There was such a richness in the sharing, but I will never forget the one agrégé who said, "It is so good to be together. It is a relief not to have to explain the difference between an agrégé or between an agrégé and a canonically vowed sister. You all get it." So now I invite one of those who gets it, Cathy Roberts, to talk to you about her vocation.
Thank you, Sister Phyllis. Let me just move my screen a little bit so I can see people and and talk to you all. Hi, I am Cathy Roberts. I'm an agrégée from the community of Joseph in Brentwood, New York. As Phyllis said, I became an agrégée in 2021. I'm going to speak for a few minutes about my experience of being an agrégée, but let me preface this by saying that much of what I say, I hear also in the other agrégés in the community. My experience is mine and theirs is theirs, but there are so many commonalities to the way we describe the call and the experience of being agrégée. I am not going to frighten you by saying this, I hope, but my call really started when I was a child. I had an aunt, Sister Catherine Marita, in the community. We were very close to her. We loved her. She was so happy in her vowed religious life, and that shone forth from her, and we just loved spending time with her. So my exposure to the Joseph community started when I was an infant, really. I always also felt that there was something else for me. I toyed with a call to canonically vowed religious life as a young teenager, and then became a little frightened of telling anybody about that or talking about that. And the moment at that time kind of passed, but I always felt there was something else for me besides, career, job, marriage, husband, children. Although all of that did happen for me, and it's been a very happy and wonderful and blessed and graced experience, being married, a mother of 4 young adult children and grandmother of 6, I still always felt that there was something else for me. I ended up getting, instead of going for an MSW, once my kids were all in school, I ended up going for a master's in theology. at our diocesan seminary, and I just loved it so much. Qualify that by saying I just love being a student. So you could put me in any classroom, I'd probably love it. But it really spoke to my heart also, the subject matter. Okay, so that was fine. And I became a director of family faith formation at 2 different parishes. I worked at that for 20 years. And towards the end of my time at the second parish, I became an associate of the Sisters of St. Joseph, thanks to working with Sister Phyllis and sort of reacquainting myself, because my aunt was long passed by now, reacquainting myself with the community and the charism and the mission. So she, talked to me about associates. I asked her questions and I became an associate. Then I retired and I had lunch with Sister Phyllis one day because we would occasionally meet to chat and share what was going on in our lives. And at that lunch, this is about maybe 8 years ago, I remember saying to her, Phyllis, there's got to be something more for me. I feel called to the more. And I don't know what that is. I can't become a canonically vowed sister at this point in my life. I'm too old. And I have a husband to boot, which Sister Phyllis likes to remind me of. But I'm being called to something more. That's all I can tell you. It's huge, it's big, it's coming from God. I don't know what it is. So Phyllis said to me, have you ever heard the word agrégé? And I said, no, what's that? And she told me that the community was just then going to begin an exploratory committee, and it was open to anybody that was interested and might want to work on this exploratory committee to look into agrégées. And she gave me a brief description of what that was. A little bit of a light bulb went off inside somewhere, and I said, that's for me. I'm joining that committee. It seems to be a step in the direction God is calling me. And I did. I sat on that committee for I think we met for 3 years under the direction of Sister Elizabeth Hill and Sister Phyllis Esposito. There were about 8 or 9 of us on the committee at the beginning. And we looked and explored and did research. Pat Monahan, as Sister Phyllis said, was huge in bringing us what we needed as a committee to do this sort of exploratory work. And all the while I was thinking, this is for me. This is for me. This is being a sister without having to be canonically vowed. This is being a sister without having to give up my husband, which I didn't want to do. And I think this is really for me. So it's kind of a good thing it took the exploratory committee about 3 years, because it took, I think, the 6 of us that were initially welcomed in with a vow of fidelity to the community of Brentwood, that amount of time for the call to flourish within us. I had another experience that I'll tell you about, and it's very mystical. So, but I know I can speak this way in front of this group. I was in the chapel, and this was even before I became an associate. I was in the chapel at the Mother House and the Mother House property, the new chapel, actually, not the novitiate chapel, not the big Sacred Heart chapel. I don't know. I was there for some sort of retreat day of prayer, in servicing something, I don't know. I ended up in the chapel, and I was sitting there trying to feel God's presence, as we do when we try to sit in prayer, and I felt the whole community of sisters, past and present around me. It was such a deep and moving and real experience for me and it touched that place in me that knew there was something more for me. I didn't know what it meant at the time, and it took a few years until I finally, after I became an associate and had that momentous lunch with Phyllis, that I knew this was all part of a piece, that this call and this vow was coming from no place else from God than from God. And the community wanted me. On some level, the community wanted me. They had gathered around me, past and present sisters. And I felt comforted and taken in and at home in that moment. So all of this pointed me in the direction of Agrégée. It is a vow for me. I take it very seriously. It's not something that happened in the moment. I often compare it to a sacramental experience where Sacraments really just celebrate an already present reality. And I believe the reality of being called to be a vowed member of the community of Joseph was always there inside of me. It took a lot of years of growth and development to get to that place, and a lot of years of God knocking on my door in various ways and sending people into my life to bring it to fruition. A big part of it was Brentwood saying, we honor the experience of Agrégée in our early community, and we want to have it now. We welcome you. Lots of tentative feelings from the community, the canonically vowed community, about having us there, but it never dissuaded me for a moment. And I found myself praying to God for patience with the community because I knew what God was calling me to. And I also recognized that it was a hard thing for sisters to wrap their heads around, especially at this point in the history of canonical vowed membership. And there's so much work and energy and emotion around where the canonical vowed community is right now, to then open the door to something like this, in spite of the fact that it's clearly part of the history of the community, I knew that that would be difficult. So I took my vow, thanks to the graciousness of the community 3 years ago, and it's really taken the 3 years for me to understand what that means. And now I feel alive with the possibilities of this for the future as a way of living the charism, bearing witness to the charism and the ministry and the mission of the community of Joseph and the history, the historical work and lives of the canonically vowed sisters, which is something that we hold very close to our own as Agrégée, very close to our hearts. And we crave and need the guidance and experience and the sharing time with the sisters as we look to the future ourselves. I have a strong feeling that there's more people out there that can be made aware of this life form, as Father Madai called it, and recognize a call within themselves to something like this, the Agrégée call. So I'm very positive about it. I'm very positive about the future. I think there's a lot of work to be done to set us up for the future, just as the sisters are doing a lot of work as they reduce in size and numbers, both physically and on the campuses where everybody is living and practicing and meeting in community. But I have a lot of faith and a lot of belief that this is a way that God is calling us to be Christ in the world into the future. Thank you.
And thank you, Cathy. I mean, just listening to you, and I've listened to you many times, but I get excited with your call because I recognize it as true vocation. And when we are together with Agrégées USA, they are stimulating meetings because Cathy is not the only one on fire with this call. And that is the most exciting part. I just want to give you a snapshot of how many Agrégées there are in the Federation right now, to put it in context, and then after that, we may have a couple of minutes for questions. But Concordia, which is a congregation of 67 at this point, which includes their sisters in Brazil, they have 16 Agrégées. Erie, a congregation of 63, has 10 Agrégées. Springfield, a congregation of 133, has 6 Agrégées. Boston has 151, and they now have 5 because they had a recent person who was a candidate who has now taken her vow. And they have worked with the sisters in Maine, which has 7 there, but they now have 1 Agrégée who went through the formation program with the Boston congregation. Again, that's sharing. Ourselves in Brentwood, we are 285, and we have 9 Agrégées, and Carondelet has 684, and they have 14 Agrégées. So it's a total of 61 agrégées in the federation. So just to give you a little numerical context there. Okay, anyone, Kristen or Stella, I don't know how you're going to do this.
If you have any questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat, or if you would like to come off mute, we probably have time for like one, maybe two questions.
Want to raise your hand? If you're not a good chat person, if you want to raise your hand, that's fine. We will try and find you.
Andrea?
So, yeah, so if I was interested in beginning the process, who do I contact directly?
Are you in one of these congregations that already has agrégés? Are you-
I don't believe so. I'm an
Where are you?
associate. Well,
Okay.
I'm an associate at St. Joseph's and Rocky River, which is the Cleveland group. So
Mhm.
I don't believe so, because I haven't really heard of this until I was exploring the website when I became a member of the Federation. And so I was looking into it. So I don't know if I meet the criteria. So I want to look into it some more.
I would suggest that you contact the congregation that's closer to you. You know, you're in Cleveland, right? Your associate director might be the person to talk to. And then together you could figure out like what would be your next step. But talk to your associate director. I'm glad that you have an interest though.
Yeah, that's wonderful. There's a question in the chat. What is meant by a vow of fidelity? It's a vow of, it's a commitment to my local Joseph community. So we don't take a vow to the church per se, like a canonically vowed sister would. We vow to our community. Our community is responsible for our formation, and you know, we try to include ourselves in all the goings on in the community as best we can. So we take a vow of fidelity to our local community, which is why, as the sisters are working on their own experience at this point in their history, we need to be included now. And my community is ready to start talking with us about that. They've come to that point. How are we going to fit in? Because we vowed to our local community. And I'm very positive. I think we're gonna find great pathways forward. Another person said, what is the association with Agrégées and associates? And that's a really good question. In our Brentwood community, that question came up over and over and over again as we were doing all our exploratory work and having town meetings with sisters. Sisters were very concerned about the associates. They didn't want them to feel like a third wheel or something. And we are too. And I think the awareness of what the difference is becoming more apparent as time goes on. I don't think associates have as much of a problem with somebody who steps into the agrégé path. Many of us did come from the associate world life form into the agrégé life form. I think 2 people didn't out of our 9. So there's a little bit of a transition if you're an associate first, but it's not the same call at all. Mine's a lifelong vow. And we take that very serious as agrégés. This is never going to change for us. We're not going to move away and not be an agrégé with the community.
One of the things that
Still in play.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I always say with that, because this comes up all the time, is that I can't tell you what the vocation to an agrégé is, because I don't have that vocation. One of the things that I have become so convinced of in these years is that it is a true call, a true vocation. And just like my married sister can't describe to anyone my vocation as a religious, I can't describe. That's why when Mary Ellen had asked me if I would be willing to do this, it was always on both our parts with the understanding it would be with an agrégé, because an agrégé can only speak for the agrégé.
There's one more question in here, if I can just take a second. How do agrégés relate to vowed religious in terms of mission and ministry? In terms of mission and ministry, I would say it's the same.
Yes.
We do a lot of anti-racism work. We have a huge ministry to the immigration people who in need in immigration. We have a English as a second language school for women who live here now and English is not their first language. It does all sorts of work to help them get grounded here in this country. And we, agrégés, are involved in those things as our energy levels and our place in life allow us to be. We have agrégés who spend most of their time in the ministry of prayer for everything the community is doing and for all of the sisters, associates, partners in mission, because that's where their energy allows them to be now. So we are right there with the canonically vowed sisters as far as being part of the mission and ministry of the canonical community.
And just following up with that, there is absolutely no legal responsibility on the part of the congregation or financial responsibility on the part of the congregation. And that's something that comes up all the time. And all the agrégés know that. There is no expectation at all that the congregation has that type of responsibility for the agrégés.
Right. And we're perfectly fine with that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So I know we went over a bit, but
That's okay. Thank you, Phyllis, and thank you, Cathy. We really appreciate your being with us. You gave us lots of good insights,
Mhm.
and I think there probably are many more questions that could be answered. And we just hope people have begun to think in a different way about it. We have an announcement that for next month, we usually meet on the third Wednesday of the month for the Dear Neighbors series. Next month, we will not be meeting on the third Wednesday. We will be meeting on the fourth Wednesday because the third Wednesday is Juneteenth, which is a federal holiday. And our next topic on June 26th will be our Vocation and Formation Committee. And then we will take a break for July and August, and we will be back again in September, on the third Wednesday of the month for a half hour. And again, we thank Phyllis and we thank Cathy and we thank all of you. And we thank all of you for giving us 4 extra minutes because we did go a little over today, but I think it was well worth it. So we ask everyone to be with us in June, and we wish you all a very blessed day.
thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you for the time.
Bye, everybody.
Great job, Cathy.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.